All right, hello. I'm Alexis, as you hopefully know. I'm a senior product designer on Plan, and I'm just gonna quickly go over my kind of like piloty process for conducting jobs to be done interviews on in an unmoderated way. This time I did it in usertesting.com. So yeah, we had just gotten, or sort of just gotten, this awesome tool called usertesting.com. I love it. And I had started working on a KR to validate some assumptive jobs for boards and also quality management, but I'm going to talk about boards. So this made me curious. I wondered if I could conduct these interviews on an unmoderated tool like user testing. And I was wondering if it could, really help us with things like jobs to be done, interviews, and persona building, what that might look like in a tool like this. Could it help us gather quality, that is the main word here, quality data in a short or shorter time frame? Could we maybe speak with participants that we don't usually reach? Maybe some that don't usually fall into our participant pool. Maybe that, maybe they don't know anything about GitLab, and that's fine. And could we gather data at any time? I guess quality data, quality data at any time, maybe while I'm sleeping or I'm in a meeting and we're gathering data. That would be awesome, right? So I wanted to go through this, see how it worked. The first thing I needed to do was gather some of my existing data and insights into Dovetail so I could better tag and synthesize and share all that information in one place. So, I had already done some internal chats around boards. So I uploaded all of those into one column. So you can see that over here into Dovetail. They were in my computer, on YouTube, wherever. So I put them all into Dovetail. I had also already done some external chats or external solution validation around boards. And this was actually also in user testing. So I put that in another column. I've talked about this a little bit before, but in order to do that, I had to go into usertesting.com and make a clip of the relevant information. So for example, here, I had done solution validation around like a really tactical thing in boards, but at the beginning, I had asked these participants to kind of tell me about themselves, why they create boards, just general information there that I thought could be helpful. So I made a clip of that. It was around 2 minutes or so per participant. And then I downloaded that clip to my computer, then I uploaded it to Dovetail. And again, with the, I wanted to be able to have this all in one place, tagged, synthesized, shared in one spot. So that was awesome. It was like a simple but fun thing I learned about user testing. So went through all of that, did some synthesis here. And it really gave me more confidence in my assumptive kind of like steps or jobs to be done that I think boards supported. So from that, I mapped out the general day or kind of cycle for someone similar to Parker. And then I really zeroed in on where I think like of that journey, what job steps did someone like Parker maybe use something like a board or something that fulfills a similar job to boards. Where are they kind of using something like that? So I took those steps there that I wanted to dig even more into and created some questions around those for interviews, thinking about really what triggers those different steps, kind of like how do they exit, enter that step, what are they using during that step, things like that. What tools are they using? Because it's often not what we think or not boards, right? I also dug more into the social or emotional motivations because I don't know, I like that kind of stuff anyway, but also I think it's very relevant to this research. I wanted to understand really what the ideals were for someone like a Parker. What do they wish their role is or was, I guess. What do they really love doing every day? What do they really love about collaborating with their team? And kind of more importantly than that, like what is stopping them from those ideals? So like, okay, we know what you want and we know what you wish you had. So what is it actually like for you on a day-to-day basis? And I think that was really where I wanted to hone in on and thinking about like, how can GitLab then get those people to their ideals or make things easier for them. I think that's kind of that gap that maybe boards or something like boards could solve, right? So moving on to kind of more tactically, now that I had these questions that I wanted to ask, and I first put them in that Google Doc, and then I had to put them into user testing because I wanted to do this in an unmoderated way. So my goal here was to keep the test to around 15 to 20 minutes or less, because that's really what you're supposed to do in usertesting.com, unless you're doing a short test, but that is the ideal. So I did it on how to time box these questions for participants. And the way I did this was I highlighted it by asking them to answer the questions in 30 seconds or less. So I literally wrote like on each task, in 30 seconds or less, blah, 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 and then ask the question. And it worked mostly. So screening, how did I actually get these participants first? I wanted to keep it fairly general. I wanted to get insights from really anyone who has kind of that overall job that I assumed boards was fulfilling, regardless if they were the hiring persona of Parker, but I assumed it would probably be Parker's, right? Just based on our persona research. But I didn't want to like specifically ask about the roles. It was more about like, hey, what do you do every day? Like, what are things are getting done? And if that matched what I assumed jobs was helping get done, like that's where I wanted to talk with those people. And I wanted to ask about team size as well. So there's a few other little things like team size. I wanted it to be more than just them or just a very small team, because I wanted to recruit people that probably felt more pain in managing like status or workflows of a team. And those are those people I'll better understand the gaps that we might need to fill. I also screened out participants that were owners or directors. I don't know, y'all can tell me if this makes sense to you, but in my experience, that's a lot of people that are maybe starting out in their roles, or maybe it's like their side business and it's usually kind of smaller or not. I wanted to talk to more kind of stable in their career or working at larger organizations, and not someone who is like starting out their own business or owning a business. And you know, that's awesome, but I wanted to talk with people that worked with larger teams. Excuse me while I have some water. So yeah, some random things I tried out that were helpful. I played around with reminding participants of the scenario. And this, I felt so cheesy doing this, but it was helpful. So I really wanted to set the scene in an unmoderated way. I included a Figma prototype. So they went to a link. They probably expected an actual prototype, but it was just a screen. And it had the scenario and what I thought could be like a typical workspace for them. So it had like a video call open and there's a coffee in front of them. And you know, my aim here was to make them feel comfortable talking and less like they were just like talking at a screen, which I assume might put you in a different headspace. Participants still sometimes went a bit over. So of course, asking less questions will help, and making sure you send out that pilot, right? So sending out that one test first to understand if there's something tripping the participants up, if something's taking a really long time or they don't understand what's going on, or of course, you know, talking with you know, a peer, right? Like going through this before you even send it out on user testing is helpful. Also, I guess, you know, I felt this from a few participants, or well, actually just one, but still, it felt kind of like pressured, I think, if the question is too involved. So making sure it's just kind of one question, not trying to kind of squish a few in there, cheating on one question, because you're giving them that 30-second time box. So it might feel daunting to them if there's too much involved there, because they're really trying to do a good job, especially in user testing. I mean, they're getting paid. So by like how you rate them as well. So it gives them more pressure to kind of like perform. So again, like kind of like you always do, just make sure you're reminding them up front that they're not being tested, right? Like they're just giving you answers and on their experience, and there's no wrong answers. Making sure to remind them upfront of that scenario, making sure that it's like framed in a positive way. So I wrote at the beginning of the test, within the scenario, please try to keep your answers to 30 seconds or less. And it's just so we can cover as many things as possible, right? Like it's not a test. And I even tried out some softer language, like try to answer this in 30 seconds or less, not like answer in 30 seconds or less. I mean, again, I don't know. It just felt maybe that would make them feel like it was more forgiving. And again, building in that time cushion, right? So yeah, I felt it was successful. I got some really great responses. And really what I did first tactically is, again, put them back into Dovetail. So I went through that process again of downloading everything to my computer, uploading it to Dovetail, and then tagging it all, creating big kind of like buckets of synthesis in the insight section, and then translating that to the mural. That was how I went about it. And my aim here was to just create an artifact for discussion with other teammates like developers and PMs, and maybe even marketing at some point. Like people can see this and kind of understand my thoughts that are always, or usually kind of all over the place. So I wanted to create that artifact, and I wanted anyone to have access to it, which I'm never sure about Dovetail, like who has access. So putting everything in Mural, I'm also creating an epic out of these things so that it's, again, where people want or can consume the information. So I think that's a helpful next step. Overall, kind of like I touched on before, what was really interesting to me was the idea of like the ideal Parker, the ideal day, their ideal role, and how we can help them get there, even from a like content or marketing perspective. Like how are we talking about this value we're adding to the users, our participants, if they're not users yet. So maybe I'll just switch over to this. That might be a little helpful. Yeah, so like, what is it that this person actually wants? Outside of like what any of our tooling is, what is it that they want out of their career? Why did they get into this role? These are some of the questions I even ask people. What is their ideal? What do they want? And then like thinking about how we can help them with that. Like, so for example, someone like Parker really wants to be an innovator. I kept hearing that, right? I want to be an innovator. I just don't have time. I want to improve the lives of people. I want to, through these solutions we're building, I want to grow organizations, add value, be valuable. So thinking about like what we could provide in that way from our planning tools, and maybe more specifically from boards. Something cool I heard was like, I kind of don't want my team to need me as like a product manager. Like, what if they just didn't even need me? What if I went away for 2 weeks and it was fine, right? So I didn't want to go I didn't want to scare people with like, replace me almost. So I said like, be my partner in product ownership, be that partner, that person helping me plan things and be visible about work. So yeah, like the ideal value of a board in that way is like really aligning teams and organizations, through the status, and empowering teams and organizations to kind of be self-sufficient, empowering them in general. And where I kind of got this was, again, thinking of their current versus their ideal, right? So their current like main pain point of a Parker would be basically reporting the status everywhere at this level that a board could fulfill. Stakeholders are asking for status. They don't understand the status of their team. They're having to organize 1 million status meetings or even go to stand up every day. So maybe, they have something like GitLab and they'll try out a board. So instead of having unclear priorities, they're wasting their time micromanaging, which product managers or Parkers really seem to hate, but it's something they have to do, they feel. They're wasting time on making sure everything's up to date and documented so they can report status. There's lack of awareness on impediments that are going to cause unpleasant surprises when they're trying to deliver. So that's what they're dealing with now. How can we help them get there? Maybe they'll try to use a board, and the ideal would be basically when someone asks for a status, they don't have to do anything. Like maybe we can replace those meetings, right? Maybe our goal is no meetings, no status meetings, no stand-ups, unless you want them. So, and then thinking about like things we aren't quite fulfilling yet too, like things that might not be up to date yet. That's something we can work on in our tool. So from that, created the primary, secondary jobs, more functional jobs for boards, did a few other things, but we can go over that later. And like I said before, as we're updating things, update our direction page within Plan with this kind of stuff. And then also maybe updating the board's category page. And one way I think might be interesting there is, like I said before, thinking about the kind of value or marketing and like copy, how we're messaging. These are the ways we're talking about boards right now. What if we better incorporate the jobs that we're validating into this so that we're speaking to people like Parker and saying like, hey, we know what's going on with you right now. We know what you want to be, and like here's how we might help you get there. So I think that's fun, and something I want to keep thinking about how to do this better. But otherwise, that is kind of my process in a nutshell. And again, we can keep talking about this. I'm working on documenting this in a more formal way, and how I can update handbook if needed, things like that. But otherwise, thanks for listening. And I'll move over to the agenda, but I'll stop sharing.
Thanks, Alexis. That's awesome. Mike, I want to ask if you want to voice your question. We still have a couple of minutes. Maybe you want Alexis to answer that during the recording?
Oh, sure. I just wasn't sure if we had time. But if we have time, Austin, do you want yours to be voiced? Or I wasn't quite sure if yours is read only, but we can skip to mine. Okay. So I cheated. I actually have 3 questions, Alexis.
Do it.
What do you think? You want me to voice it? I should probably voice it.
Yeah.
Good point. So what methods did you use to zoom out from the current solution, which would be boards, and abstract out to the job level? And I heard you mention asking them about like career aspirations, and I was wondering if that helped or if there are other techniques that you used. Muted.
Oh my gosh, y'all. Okay. I was like, I probably shouldn't have stopped sharing my screen. But yeah, I mean, I really started, and I had started even in some of those first interviews that weren't the job to be done interviews. But like you said, asking kind of what is your ideal? Like, what does your day look like? In a kind of like overall perspective, like, what do you like about your day? What don't you like about your day? What do you like about your team? What don't you like about your team? What do you like about your environment? What don't you like? What do you like about collaborating? What don't you like? Why did you get into this role? And like, what's going on now that you don't like? So a lot of those kind of questions. And
could you kindly zoom in on those likes and
Yes.
don't likes? I remember I looked at this a week ago, and I really loved that approach.
Thank you.
Did some of these, tell me a bit more about how the likes and dislikes kind of informed your process.
So I guess I kind of iterated on the jobs to be done interviews as well with some of the information I gained. So I might do like 2 interviews and then maybe kind of zoom in on some of these questions I thought were more pertinent or like that I wanted more information about. So, I noticed there's people talking about when they first enter the office, they're having to schedule a bunch of meetings. When they leave the office, they're having to schedule a bunch of meetings. They mentioned they hate micromanaging their team, but they're also mentioning all the time that they have to like hunt down their team for updates. What does that mean? And they mentioned they really love like collaborating, but really they're just spending a lot of time in meetings talking about status. So things like that. And then kind of what I touched on earlier, understanding what they love, understanding kind of like the emotional aspect or status or social aspect, what they love, and then understanding like their current day. So like having them talk about what they want, and then like going through the job steps of what they're actually doing and seeing where there's mismatches. So they love innovating, they love doing all this, but they're telling me they're not really spending a lot of time in that. They're spending a lot of time in meetings talking about status. They're getting surprised by things not releasing or blockers, and it's like losing trust with stakeholders. But they have this ideal of being like this very trusted member of the team that, you know, they're adding a lot of value and stakeholders love them, that kind of thing. So again, understanding what is the ideal for them, what do they want, what do they not want, and then comparing that with the reality of like the job steps that they're going through and what is actually happening during their day. Does that make sense?
It does, and that sounds a lot like the approach that Indy Young outlines in the Mental Models book. You know, framing your questions and getting into this sort of, this doesn't apply anymore in the pandemic, but like, what are they thinking about when they're walking down the hallway, right? Rather than what tool are they using? And so your approach is spot on, I think. And you, I don't know if you've read the book, but you intuitively approached it that way, I think. So kudos.
Awesome, thank you. And I think Mike and I talked about, there was some kind of like interesting, we could all talk about this later, but like interesting like drama within like the jobs to be done community of like the different process, and is it progress, is it tasks, is it activities, and I took all that in, and it was kind of like fun to think about, but we'll talk about that later. Drama is fun in that way. Do you have more questions, Mike?
Great job.
Thank you.
Were those all your questions, Mike?
I rest my case.
Awesome. Anybody else?
I have a question. I'll write it down after I say it, sorry. I know this research effort can take a lot of time, especially around synthesis and scheduling and just doing the overhead work. How did you feel like this impacted your ability to be present in milestone or feature specific design work over the last quarter?
Yeah, I think kind of to the objectives I set out on, it's, you know, how do I do research while I sleep, right? Or like how kind of reducing the need for a moderator was even helpful, right? Or getting participants very quickly, letting user testing do that for us, recruit, and getting more participants that maybe I wouldn't speak to usually. So I think it in that way freed me up from like a moderating, like tactical research perspective, right? Because I'm not having to be there to moderate. It's, you know, like async. I'm not there. I'm not doing it myself. I'm just synthesizing everything. This synthesis part of it, I don't think was any less time, which is fine. Like I like that part, but I think it does free up more space when it comes to recruiting and actually conducting interviews, if that makes sense. Is that your question?
Yeah, definitely.
Awesome. We're almost at time. If you have more questions for Alexis or for the other presenters, please leave that in the doc